one of the reasons why I had to do some profiles on these particular people. Because we're going to cover many different elections, and there are going to be many different names, and there's going to be many different scenarios. So very important that you know who these people are on your IDs, okay? Our first presidential election we're going to talk about is the election of 1876. Very unusual presidential election, and will be a focus of your exam, so make sure you're paying attention. Now, we got to kind of back up, because who was president of the United States at this time? Okay, who was elected president of the United States after the Civil War, after the Reconstruction? Ulysses S. Grant. So we're sitting right here with Ulysses S. Grant as President of the United States. And like I mentioned to you, we talked a little bit about his profile, but his administration was simply full of scandals. There was all kinds of scandals during the Grant administration. So, because of these scandals during the presidency of the Ulysses S. Grant, the Democratic Party was pretty confident that they would win the election of 1876, because what was Grant? A Republican. Okay? So Grant had, although he had long terms, he certainly had problems during that time. A lot of scandals. He was involved in the Plains Indian Wars. He had some issues there. And it was just not a good presidency. Many historians believe he might have been one of the worst presidents we ever had. Okay? Good Civil War general, not a great president. And because of all the problems he had, the Democrats think they're going to win the election of 1876. Now they choose as their candidate Governor Samuel J. Tilden of New York, who I think Alexa knows all kinds of things about, right?
Yeah.
Okay? And he would be their presidential candidate, Governor Samuel J. Tilden of New York. The Republicans are going to counter with another governor, this time a governor of Ohio, Rutherford B. Hayes. So in the election of 1876, you're going to have a Democratic governor of New York, Samuel J. Tilden, against a Republican governor of Ohio, Rutherford B. Hayes. And the result of this election was very, very interesting and very unpredictable. This is one of the most unusual presidential elections in history, if not the most unusual. Now, during this process, Governor Tilden of New York actually received 250,000 more popular votes than Governor Hayes did. So when all the votes were counted at the end of the election of 1876, Samuel J. Tilden actually had 250,000 more popular votes. But we learned from this last election with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton that popular vote doesn't mean much, right? Because Hillary Clinton had over 2 million more popular votes than Donald Trump and lost the election in the Electoral College. Well, when they counted the electoral votes in this particular election, Governor Tilden had the advantage 184 to 165. So not only does Tilden win the popular vote by over 250,000, he also wins the electoral vote 184 to 165. So what, if you look at those electoral votes from what we talked about before, what might be the problem? Why isn't Governor Tilden the new President of the United States? He didn't win by enough. Matter of fact, ironically, he was one electoral vote short of that majority that he needed to be president. One short. One short. Well, what would happen, kiddos? Emily, what happens? We talked about these before. What happens when neither candidate has the number of electoral votes that he? No. Who do they take it to? They take it to the House of Representatives. Well, ordinarily, when no presidential candidate receives the majority needed for election, it goes to the House, and the House makes a choice. This has happened a couple times in our lectures, right? Well, we had a little snafu in this election. There were 4 states that sent in 2 sets of returns instead of 1. They sent in 2 sets of returns. So in this election, 4 states sent in 2 sets of returns. The 4 states that sent in 2 sets of returns were South Carolina, Florida, Oregon, and Louisiana. Those 4 states, South Carolina, Florida, Oregon, and Louisiana, sent in not 1, but 2 sets of returns. So what would happen then? What would you do? This happened when Al Gore lost to George W. Bush in the election of 2000 because Florida screwed up. Remember? Florida miscounted their votes, and so they had a recount. So they're going to have a recount of votes in all 4 of these states with these 20 electoral votes up for grabs. Because the 4 states that we're talking about that sent in 2 sets of returns add up to 20 electoral votes. How many does Tilden need? 1. And you know what Rutherford B. Hayes needs? All of them. He's got to have them all to win. Okay? So this sets the stage for a recount, and those 20 crucial electoral votes were up for grabs, and Governor Tilden needed only 1 vote to win, where Governor Hayes needed all 20. So what are they going to count in South Carolina, Florida, Louisiana, and Oregon? What are they going to count? What are they recounting? What type of votes are they recounting? Very good, Sully. Popular votes, because when they add up these popular votes, that will say who wins that state, which will then give that candidate what? The electoral votes that are attached to that state. So according to the United States Constitution, all popular votes in those 4 states had to be counted and able to distribute those electoral votes properly. Well, during this recount, Congress created an electoral commission. And what would this electoral commission do? What would they do? What would they oversee? The recount, absolutely. They would oversee the recount. So in order to break the deadlock, Congress creates an electoral commission. And what's another name for a commission? A committee. Okay? And it consisted of 15 members. This electoral commission consisted of 15 members. What type of people would be on that committee, do you think? 3 different types of people were assigned to this committee. Senators, representatives,
Supreme Court judges.
very good. Supreme Court justices, very, very good. So, 5 United States senators were appointed. 5 United States representatives were appointed. And 5 Supreme Court justices were appointed to this electoral commission. 5 senators, 5 representatives, 5 Supreme Court justices, 15. What would be your next concern on these appointees?
Are they valid?
Are they what? What did you say?
Are they valid?
Valid. I thought you said something else.
Trustworthy?
Well, yeah, but what would be your concern? This is a political election.
Oh, right.
What party are they a member of? So we'll break that down. Concerning the 5 United States senators, 3 were Republicans and 2 were Democrats. Concerning the United States senators, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Concerning the 5 United States representatives, opposite. 2 Republicans, 3 Democrats. Are we even?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. As far as the 5 Supreme Court justices, this is going to be kind of tricky, isn't it? You got 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 1 non-partisan. In other words, doesn't belong to either political party. So are we even? Across the board? We are. So you have in the Senate, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. In the House, 2 Republicans, 3 Democrats. And in the Justices, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 1 nonpartisan. Well, the nonpartisan member of the commission was Supreme Court Justice David Davis. David Davis, who's on your ID sheet, was the nonpartisan Supreme Court Justice. David Davis. Well, you know something's going to happen here, don't you?
Probably.
Supreme Court Justice David Davis suddenly resigned his position in the Supreme Court because he had been elected to the United States Senate and could not serve in both positions. So now what do we have? We have to figure out what? Who we're going to replace, and how easy is it going to find a nonpartisan justice? There are none. Okay? So this gets so crazy, believe it or not, the Republicans and Democrats just simply made an agreement and made a deal on the presidency. The two parties got together and they just said, let's make a compromise. And you know what they did? They picked Rutherford B. Hayes to be the president. So the Republicans and Democrats, because of all the confusion, just got together and decided they would agree to accept Rutherford B. Hayes as president. Now, who's going to have to agree to this more than the other side? Democrats, because they're thinking, Jesus, I beat him in the popular vote. I was only one vote away from the Electoral College to be the president. So who's going to gain more by Rutherford B. Hayes being president? Who's going to be able to demand more if this is going to happen? Yeah, absolutely. The Democrats are going to get the good deal on this, right? So the Democrats agreed to accept Rutherford B. Hayes as president under the following three conditions. The Democrats said, even though our guy probably should have won, we'll let Rutherford B. Hayes be the president if you do these three things. And that's going to be favorable to who? The Democrats, absolutely. Now, where are most Democrats from at this point geographically? South. So think about this. We're removed from the Civil War about 10, 11 years. The Reconstruction hasn't gone perfect. There's still some concerns. And so the first thing that the Democrats want, if they're going to allow Rutherford B. Hayes to be president of the United States, is they want all federal troops that were located in the South withdrawn. Because the North had been occupying the South with troops since the end of the Civil War. And they said, well, we'll let Hayes be president, but you will withdraw all federal troops from the South. Okay, what did the North do to the South during the Civil War at the latter stages? What? Destroyed it, including what? Transportation lines, railroads. So the second deal was the Democrats said, we'll take Rutherford B. Hayes as president if you will build and finance a railroad back across the South to make up for the one that you what? Destroyed. Although I'll bet you this one was bigger and better than what they had before. So they said, yep, as Democrats, we will accept Rutherford B. Hayes as president, even though our guy probably should have won, but you have to not only build but pay for a railroad across the South. And if you think about politics and presidential elections and administrations, what might be the final thing that the South wanted if Rutherford B. Hayes was going to be president? Think about that. What politically might they have wanted? Because what's Hayes going to do when he takes office? He's going to put together a what? Cabinet. And what are they going to want, Alexa, in that cabinet? A fair share of Southerners or Democrats. Remember, they're Democrats. So what they're saying is, the third thing we want is when you put together your presidential cabinet, Mr. Republican Rutherford B. Hayes, we want a fair share of Democrats and or Southerners in your presidential cabinet. So because things are so confusing, the Democrats simply agreed to accept Rutherford B. Hayes as President of the United States under the following three conditions. One, all federal troops that were located in the South would be withdrawn. Two, the North would agree to pay for and build a railroad across the South. And three, President Hayes would agree to appoint a fair share of Southern Democrats to his presidential cabinet. When the Republicans and Hayes agreed to that, Rutherford B. Hayes became President of the United States, despite the fact his opponent not only received more popular votes, but also more electoral votes. That's the first time in American history that has ever happened, and the only time that we ever made a deal for the presidency. And it will be the last, I'm sure. So if you can imagine that, a deal was made that made this man right here, Rutherford B. Hayes, President of the United States. Okay? I'll give you some notes about his presidency, 6 notes that was kind of it, just little interesting tidbits about President Rutherford B. Hayes. President Hayes' wife became the First Lady to have earned a college education. President Hayes' wife, First Lady, became the First Lady to have a college education. Every First Lady prior to her did not get a college degree. President Hayes and his wife had 8 children. 8 children. More children than any other presidential couple. 8. You ever heard of Ohio State University? The Buckeyes? If it wasn't for Rutherford B. Hayes, we wouldn't have it. He helped find, or he was one of the founders, that would be a better way to put it, one of the founders of Ohio State University. Probably without his efforts, you may not have Ohio State University. See how smart you are after the break. Lucy Rutherford, President Rutherford's wife, earned the nickname Lemonade Lucy during the time she served as First Lady. Why? Why did they call her Lemonade Lucy? No? She didn't like it? Is that what you said?
She liked it.
Well, kind of. You're not far off there. You're really not that far off there. She liked lemonade rather than... Odd. No? Nope. Close. She would not allow alcohol in the White House. She was against alcohol, so they referred to her as Lemonade Lucy. She prohibited any alcohol whatsoever in the White House, which was very unusual at the time. They called her Lemonade Lucy. Basically saying that she was against alcohol and would rather serve lemonade. Who knows, that's what she served. But if you, that's kind of what you, somebody that's very against alcohol, you might call them, Lemonade Rachel. Okay? Because they're against alcohol. Okay? So the First Lady was referred to as Lemonade Lucy because she would not allow alcohol in the White House. By the way, President Hayes was the first United States president who had a telephone in the White House. First one that had a telephone in the White House. President Hayes was the first president that had access to a telephone in the White House. Now, we were just getting prepared for this as we left D.C. the other day. We left on Saturday morning, and Sunday they had a big event planned at the White House that we would like to have seen, but we weren't there. What was that? What was the big event at the White House last Sunday? The Easter egg roll. Remember? That's a big deal. It was Lemonade Lucy, or Lucy Hayes, that started the tradition of the Easter egg roll at the White House on Easter Sunday. Okay? And it's a very big deal. We were really looking forward to that. And you think that's kind of stupid? You should have seen the number of people that were rolling into D.C. on Friday. I bet the population doubled. We were there, a week, and by Friday, you just couldn't believe it. You could just see the crowds as you were walking downtown, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. People coming in for the Easter weekend, and that's a big part of that, if you could get tickets to the Easter egg roll. And she was the First Lady, and she started the Easter egg roll on the lawn of the White House. Okay, let's talk about our next subtopic then, which is difficulties for Hayes, which tells you what, Charles? He's going to have a lot of problems during his term. He's going to have a lot of split problems. When you get appointed to the presidency, you're inheriting some things, right? Difficulty for President Hayes. Now, he only had 4 years in the White House, 1 term, and they were all very difficult years. He did not have a positive presidency, I can just tell you. Well, what's the key when you're elected president as far as Congress goes? You would like Congress to be controlled by who? The Democrats or Republicans if you're a Republican? Absolutely. Well, throughout his administration, the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. It was a Democratic-controlled House his entire presidency. And concerning the Senate, half of the presidency, half of the 4 years, it was controlled by the Democrats as well. So he had a pretty democratically controlled Congress during his presidency, which is never good as far as getting things done and having conflict. So during his 4 years, the House was totally controlled by Democrats, and the Senate was controlled by the Democrats 2 of the 4 years. Not necessarily good. Now, not only did he have problems that way, what other problems? Who else did have? He was appointed. So if you're appointed something, what can be your problem? You don't get picked by your party, you're appointed. And basically, who controlled the appointment? His party or the other party? The other party. So he had problems within his own party as well. Not only did he have difficulties with Congress because they were all Democrats, he had troubles within his own party as well. He faced opposition from members of his own party. And during this election process, which was not pretty, the Republican Party really split into 2 groups. Not every Republican agreed with making this deal with the Democrats. And these 2 different sides of the Republican Party gave themselves nicknames. One half was called the stalwarts, and the other half of the Republican Party were known as the half-breeds. So there was such a split in the Republican Party during the Hayes administration that they gave themselves nicknames. The stalwarts were one faction of the Republican Party, and the